Welcome to today's conversation, everybody, on discipleship as worship. We'll explore how discipleship is more than just a Sunday commitment, but it's actually a way of life that honors God daily. And as we follow Jesus and as we guide others, our actions become expressions of worship, reflecting God's love and grace in everything we do. So join us today as we discuss how living out discipleship turns everyday moments into powerful acts of worship and devotion to God. And as always, I am incredibly just thankful and filled with joy to be here with Craig and Brian and Myra. Craig is the Disciples Made's men's catalyst, and Brian is the Disciples Made founder, and Myra is our women's disciple making catalyst.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
What's
please.
a catalyst? I'm going to throw you off your game today. I'm going to work hard at throwing you off your game. What's a catalyst, Myra? What does that mean?
A catalyst is that little bit of something that you drop in there that makes the whole reaction start. That describes Craig to a T, doesn't it?
I'd say so.
Certainly Myra, but I don't know about me. But it reminds me of my chemistry days. I've had chemistry. Gosh, let me see, 3 times on my own, and then I've got 5 kids. So I went through chemistry 5 more times vicariously through them as they journeyed through that. So yeah, I remember that from my chemistry days, Myra.
Yep. You're talking about being a catalyst, and then you're talking about having 5 kids.
That little. I'm going to leave that one right there. That's probably the most worshipful thing we did was not pursue that one any further. Yeah, I picked that word a long time ago because it's like, who are the people that when you're around them, you can't help but to find yourself eventually into a conversation about what it means to follow Jesus and multiply leaders who do the same. And so that's the reason we use that term. And these folks have proven that that's who they are, and they can't help it. So appreciate them. Appreciate all of you. Jason, you're the same way.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to start and just explore a little bit about, this topic of worship and disciple making and all this kind of stuff. And so I'm just going to be really conversational today. And I just want to ask you guys, and honestly, I'm going to throw it out to you, and whoever is led to jump in first, please do. But when you think about discipleship as worship, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Can I ask another annoying question before we answer that question?
Go ahead. I don't have a choice.
You may not.
Tell him no, Jason. Tell him no.
Yeah.
Like, why do we do these monthly topics? And why do we have a webinar to unpack it? What's that about? Like, why? I mean, I know the answer. I'm just curious what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, I'd like to know too.
Yeah. Jason, you want to swing at it?
Well, sure. Well, every month, we have as Disciples Made and Fully Alive by Disciples Made, we have a very intentional a plan every year, right? That, each month of the year, after a lot of prayer and thought, right, is that we intentionally have a topic. And so this topic, so for this month, discipleship as worship, we'll be talking about it all month long on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, but then as well as on the Fully Alive app, right? And so I know that there's opportunities for, whether it's articles that are posted or polls that are shared, conversation is generated, different right next steps to take. And so I think it's very important for everybody who's in this Fully Alive by Disciples Made community to have clarity. I think clear is kind. And so that's the hope. That's why I think one of the biggest reasons we do this is so that when people hop in the Fully Alive app is that we are stewarding that app well and making sure that we are helping everybody win, that we're helping everybody grow in character and calling. And so this is to help bring about more clarity. And I think also, to that it's not just an app, that there are real people behind the app, in the app, on the app, and so we're a team of 4, right? That we love doing this, we love talking about it, and it's a good excuse to be with each of you. So
Hang
it's
out.
fun.
Indeed.
Well, one of
Yeah,
the things I'm going to jump in there too. One of the things I just appreciate about having the monthly topic is that I wouldn't necessarily sit around and just devote some concerted time to worship I obviously I've incorporated worship in my life. That's something that I do on a regular basis, in fact daily, but I don't sit around and think about it. So by having this topic for the month, it puts in my mind fresh at the top of my mind, what is worship and how am I doing that, and am I doing it right? Should I be doing it differently? Can I incorporate it in more of my life? So I just appreciate it. Just not only from a participant within the webinar, but also someone that just has gotten so much from Disciples Made and the Fully Alive app and all of that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I love it. There's a term I heard recently from some business guru type folks. They encouraged us as business leaders, owners, or whatever, ministry leaders to open the kimono a little bit, which means kind of let people behind the curtain to see kind of the why behind what you do. And it's like you see more and more of this, like television shows are showing the whole set. They're pulling back and showing the cameras at work. And it's like, this is how this really works. Take the production element out of it and kind of show the intent behind. And what we want is, obviously, we just want you to have a tool in this Fully Alive app that motivates you, inspires you, encourages you. Craig, you basically just let us know that works for you as a person all in on this whole stuff. And so we think through you get 12 months out of the year, and we want, what are the 12 most important themes that help to really reinforce the unique way we go about helping disciples live fully alive? Character and calling, the multiple phases of spiritual formation, the different things that we cover. We want to reinforce those things clearly 4 weeks, 5 weeks at a time, depending on what that month is, in order for those things to be part of who we are, not just what we say. So thanks for letting us open that kimono a little bit there, Jason. That's why we do it. So we just love for you to engage around this stuff with us, because we all learn from each other.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Myra, I'd love to hear from you. Like when you think about discipleship as worship, like what's the first thing that comes to mind?
When I think of discipleship as worship, and I look at our definition of discipleship as growing in character and calling, right? What comes to mind is as we grow in character and calling, we're imitating Jesus all the time. And as we imitate him, the cliche, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? I don't want to flatter Jesus. I don't want to flatter God. I want to worship him. But sincere flattery means I mean it. I mean that he is as beautiful and as wonderful as he is. And so discipleship as that growth and development, pursuit of character and calling, relates to worship in that way. By simply pursuing that, I am worshiping Jesus. I am telling him of his great value to me, and that I want to become like him and honor the Father as he honors the Father, respond as he would respond.
You didn't say anything about a Sunday service, and maybe I jumped the gun with asking that question the way I did. But I think, for the majority of people, and that's a good thing. I'm not saying you should have brought up the Sunday service, but I think that's where a little bit of the tension is with perhaps those who are listening, is that when they think of worship, they don't think of discipleship.
Right.
When they think of worship, they think of the Sunday service and whatnot.
Right. Words matter, and we have redefined, or we have defined in the Western church for sure, worship as that hour on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, when I first hear the word, that probably is where my mind goes immediately. But I feel like that's a weak understanding of it.
Yeah, and isn't it fair to say that there are things that reinforce that? A worship center, worship room, whatever else we call the place where worship happens.
Yeah, there's a worship
It's
team, right?
worship team. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, as I've mentioned before, and you guys know, of course, but I've mentioned on previous webinars, is that I came to the game late. I was 40 whenever Jesus found me, and I came to faith in Him. And so it's not really, I'm not too far removed from worship being that Sunday expression. That I'm gonna worship Jesus. So what does that mean? I'm gonna go to service on Sunday morning. For the first few minutes of that service, we're going to sing 3 or 4 songs that are intended to praise God. And that is our worship. We're going to sing. We're going to be led by a group of people, the worship team in the worship center, to worship God. And that's when we do it. That's how we do it. And that's the place that we do that. And so for quite a while, that was my understanding and definition of worship. That I do that once a week on Sunday mornings in this place at this time with these people. So it was very narrow. And I've since discovered that you can be a whole lot more than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say prior to seminary, I would have the same. But since seminary, when you are kind of forced to read, languages and dig into theological concepts and things like this, the definition of worship for me expanded big time. And there's probably 2 key verses that kind of share my nuance. And I'll hit this at the top here because it might help shape some of the rest of our conversation. But Romans 12:1 in the NIV says, offer yourselves as living sacrifices to God, for this is your reasonable act of worship, I think is the way it translates it. And that word reasonable is the word, the Greek word there is the word we get logical from. It almost sounds just like it in Greek. So it's your logical. It's like, well, with everything that you've received from God, from Jesus, it's only logical that you respond in a particular way. And that way is worship. And the word there really harkens back to the Old Testament. It's like the God services that you do, and it refers particularly to the Levites. And they were the people that served in the temple. They're the ones that did the work that mediated between God and people. They were the ones that worked the temple. And so the temple was the place where God met people, and they were the ones that did that work. And so it seems to me that in Romans 12:1, Paul is inviting us to do the only logical thing in response to what Jesus has done for us, and that's offer yourself to become a mediator who helps people, that does the work to help people find God and help God get into people. I can't think of a better way to describe the role of disciple making, than that. So that's kind of one. It's a services thing, and it's a logical response. The second one, John 4:24, where Jesus met that woman at the well and had this big conversation about worship. And for her, it was kind of this contested thing. Well, you Jews do it, we don't do it, whatever. And what Jesus said is, God is spirit, and His worshipers. Let's not worry about where this is. You must worship in spirit and in truth. And that word worship really is about a posture. It's a bowing down in reverence. So it's a humble, contrite, recognizing that the God we serve is absolutely transcendent, absolutely other, absolutely magnificent. And we get to logically serve Him. So posture and logical service that helps connect people to God. Those are the things that I think of when this idea of worship comes up.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things, we're about to talk a little bit about that Sunday, Monday disconnect. And I think, for me, as having been a worship leader for a couple decades and, throughout high school and all this other kind of stuff, is that, it's an expression of worship. But I I don't know, just my own personal story, became a little dissatisfied with pouring in all my efforts on that 1 hour a week, and that that I would say that I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but I'm still a worship leader. But the way that I'm doing that is by helping people live a lifestyle of worship, that their whole life is an act of worship. And I think that for me, that paradigm and that truth and that reality is what drives this conversation, and what we're talking about today is
Yeah.
not just a worshipful expression as the ecclesia, as the gathered church, but a lifestyle of worship of, like you said, Brian, I've always heard it as your spiritual act of worship. I haven't, I must have skipped the translation about your reasonable. It's a reasonable
Logical.
act of worship. It's just logical, right?
Spock.
That,
Yes.
you know, I
Live
like
long and
that.
worship. Yeah.
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. And,
Well, Jason,
go ahead.
I mean, we're not trying to say it's one or the other, right?
Right.
Uh,
I think that's important to make
it's
sure.
really important to point
everybody
out.
hears.
It's like, we're not saying choose. I like to say that I really enjoy Sunday morning, and I really enjoy when a worship team has done the work to hone their skills and their craft and provide a context for us to engage in. Let's put some terms on this: corporate worship and my life of worship. They're both worship, but they're different, and they invite different ways to go about this. And so Lori, who is in the chat and paying attention to this, just talked about how amazing it is to engage. And she describes a lot of stuff, but she's describing corporate worship that we as a family of believers do when we're together. And I think there's something really special that God delights in an extra way in that corporate thing. Like Psalm 133 comes to mind,
Yeah.
how good and beautiful it is when brothers and sisters dwell together in unity. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up just to make sure that nobody thinks that it's like it's one or the other. But it's just, this lifestyle of worship. And obviously that's what we're, focusing on today, so let's just talk a little bit about bridging that gap between Sunday and Monday, recognizing that we've gathered, corporately with our church family. We've been able to gather together, to uplift one another, to hear the gospel, to receive and partake of the Lord's Supper or anything of that nature, and to be reminded of His grace and His love. And so now here we go. We are stepping into the rest of our week, and so I think for a lot of people there can be that disconnect between Sunday worship service and how they live the rest of the week. So for our men's catalyst and women's catalyst, I'd love to hear for you as you guys spur one another on to grow in character and calling and disciple, the men and women respectively. How do you encourage people to bridge that gap and carry the spirit of worship into their daily lives as the only logical choice?
One of the things that I try to help people, and it's not that they don't know it, they know it, but God is God every day, and He is good every day, and He is worthy of our praise
Amen.
and admiration every day. And He's also moving every day. He's busy, and He is not just doing that on Sundays. He's not just moving around us on Sundays. He's not just moving in us or through us on Sundays. So that's something that if we make ourselves available and if we're looking for Him, we can see Him in everything around us. And so it's almost an expectancy of His presence, of His work, of His love, of His goodness, just to be ever present, always around us. And so that was helpful for me. And that's one of the things that I share with the guys that I work with. And also for me, there was this progression. As I said, I was fairly new to the faith, and so the first thing for me was that I had to believe that he was God and I wasn't, because for a while I thought I was, or at least
That's that posture part. I like
right.
that.
Yeah. So I had to acknowledge and really take that in, that you were God. And so it started with me just believing it. And then I needed to say it. I needed to proclaim it to him. I needed to proclaim it to myself. I needed to proclaim it to my family and the people that I was around. He is God and he is good. And then I kind of evolved into, it's not that I'd left that behind, but to doing the things that I thought were worshipful. And they were, but like participating in corporate worship, singing, praying, the spiritual practices that point towards his sovereignty, towards his goodness, and Lord's Supper, all the even acts of service. Those are things of worship. So I kind of moved through this thing that I believe it, I speak it, I say it, I do it, and then it was more becoming it, that I am becoming this living sacrifice because of the way that I live. I am a monument, in a sense, to how good he is, because this is not me. This is him, and the work that he has done in me and through me, and being that living sacrifice is, I think, the ultimate form of worship. And Myra, like you said, imitation is. Paul said, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ." And so, who else are we going to imitate? And that's, I think, the ultimate form of worship as well.
Myra, what about you?
Yeah. A lot of things. I think one of the most important things that kind of links to what Craig was saying is worship is always that response to what Jesus is doing, what he's doing in us, what he's doing around us, and what he's doing through us. And to remember that worship is how we respond to that. Sometimes we respond with sacrifice. Sometimes we respond with those words of praise and hands raised and song. And there are just all kinds. Sometimes we simply respond by stopping and wondering. And so couple other things that come to mind is, different people resonate with different styles of worship. Okay. Somebody feels most worshipful, aware of what God is doing and who he is when they're out in nature. And somebody else when they're working with a hammer and creating something beautiful, or a chisel and carving, and seeing him in those things. Some people need music for that. Some people need beauty in a cathedral or something. There are just so many ways that people respond to that. The key that I think when I work with women and the women who work with women alongside and with me, is just talking about being aware of who you are and who God is, and watching for him and listening for him, and then responding to that. Because our acts of worship come out of our awareness of him in the moment.
There's a fantastic book that talks about the things, Myra, that you're talking about. I think it's called Spiritual Pathways. I can't remember the author right now, but if you look up that resource, really unpacks those different things. One of the things, Craig, when you were talking, I had an image come to mind. Anybody familiar with like the Krispy Kreme donut stores? They have the red light that comes on called Hot and Now. When you were describing, your transition from kind of worship on Sunday to worship all the time, it's like God never turns off the hot and now thing. When you step out, he's still there. He's still, everything's fresh. Like just come on in. You don't have to wait until next Sunday after the 11 o'clock service or the 10:30 service is open. So I really love that perspective. Jason, one other thought I would say here, as far as making the connection between Monday and the rest of the week, Craig and Myra have kind of talked about it from what can the individual do and what great wisdom they've shared. But my thoughts really kind of lean more toward what can the church leadership do? And just would posit these questions. We have basically said, don't try to choose between one or the other. They're both real. And they both need to become more and more real. and more valuable. But there does need to be a question that happens: which one serves which? Does the corporate worship or the gathered worship where the singing and all the formal activities take place, is it there to serve a lifestyle of worship, or do the lifestyles serve the corporate gathering? That framework could really help church leaders make a shift between we are the product of worship that we invite the lifestyles to come engage in. That's the lifestyle where the individuals serve the corporate. Or are we people who basically take the time that we're together to inspire and instruct and encourage the people that come to live out that lifestyle all week long? I just think that simple framework could invite all of us as church leaders to have that John 4 posture of worshiping in spirit and truth in a way that serves God and serves his greater purpose through people. Equipping people to do their Levitical or Levite, works of service that are logical to help mediate between God and man.
As a church staff person, I know that a lot of the conversations is that I think a lot of church leaders would love to say worship is incredibly passionate. The worship service, right, is incredibly passionate. People are highly engaged and they love to be there. And boy, worship is just powerful. We'd all love to hear that. And what I firmly believe in and have found is that if you don't have your people living life on mission and engaging culture and making disciples and helping others grow in their walk with Jesus, growing to become more like Jesus, to do the things that Jesus did, getting into the mess of people's lives. If you don't have that, you're just having people who are showing up to receive something. And if they're not, talking about it or partnering with Jesus where they live, work, learn, and play throughout the week, they're showing up to something that's, I don't know if I want to say it's foreign, but maybe to set up my point is that when you have people who are partnering with Jesus to reach out to the least, the last, the lost, walking with people in their brokenness, representing Jesus day in and day out. I mean, that you're getting into the mess of people's lives, or maybe you're a Christian in the marketplace, and and Jesus is using you to walk alongside somebody who's going through a painful divorce. When you look forward to worship when you're engaged in mission throughout the week, right? Because you're like, I'm tired, I'm drained, I need my people, I need my brothers and sisters in Christ that can lift me up, that can speak into my life, that can encourage me. And boy, Jesus, I have seen your goodness because I have seen the thief at work throughout this week, and I don't want to be anywhere else but here. That creates a very different worshiping environment on Sundays that, just going to show how this life of worship comes to be, and how the Monday through Saturday lifestyle of worship, of partnering with Jesus and giving our lives as the spiritual, reasonable act of worship, it changes how we approach Sundays.
I love that picture. I'll turn the dial just a little bit to come at it just from around the curve from what you just said. You talked about I'm drained. I've been engaged in mission. I come back and I'm replenished at worship. The other image that I have when I do this is all this godly activity, right? This logical service that I've been offering as worship. I sat with a guy yesterday who was having real big relational issues. And I felt the whole time that I'm worshiping Jesus. I'm worshiping God because I'm trying to mediate between this guy and God, who wants to instruct him on how to make these decisions in his relationship. So basically, that's a collection of beautiful works that have been done. So when I go to worship on Sunday, it's almost like I get to put those crowns before the King and celebrate the worship he's allowed me to do. There is a replenishment, and there's times where the replenishment is is as needed as an oxygen mask, spiritual oxygen mask in any given week, right? But there are also times where you just come and you just give thanks for the opportunity to join him in that beautiful mission and to just kind of lay those offerings in front of him. So thank you for bringing that up, because that made me think of that.
Myra, you had a. Oh, go ahead, Craig.
I was just going to say, I was going to add to that a little bit, just in that when we are on mission, we're always in over our head. God is always putting us in positions that we just can't do it without him. And, he has done a work in me that my default answer to him is yes. And, but I often just don't know what I'm getting myself into whenever he sets me in a direction. And so whenever he starts to move in the midst of that mission, and he's doing things I know that I couldn't do on my own, and when I realize my dependency on him to even accomplish this thing in the first place, when there are wins, my default is worship. My default is that is, it's not only reasonable, it is just the response to him moving.
It's logical.
Yeah. It is just the outflow of him and seeing him work and being used by him. You almost can't resist it, it seems.
I love that. You just, Craig, you just said that that word outflow, or overflow, right? That when we are abiding with Jesus day in and day out consistently, and staying in step with the Spirit, and allowing the words of Jesus to teach us and to guide us and instruct us, and we respond in that obedience, that everything is just an overflow of what God is doing in us, and that's a fun way to live, is when you're so connected with God that everything you do in service to him is just that overflow from what he's already doing in you.
Yeah, I was going to say, in response to what Brian said earlier about putting just a little bit of, coming around the corner at what you said, Jason, is you were both approaching worship from the previous week, but worship is also preparation for the week to come. And that corporate, and I'm talking here about corporate worship, but that corporate worship is really about, coming in, offering replenishment, refreshment from the week before, giving people the opportunity. We have the opportunity to throw the crowns at the foot of the cross, at our Savior's feet. How amazing is that? But it's also then that we get built up, that we get challenged, that we get encouraged to go back out and do it all over again. And as Craig said, then to make that yes a default, and not knowing where we're going, that's pretty powerful worship, that default of yes.
One of the things that that's just kind of the picture that I'm getting, or at least the topic that's coming to my mind, is that if all this stuff is true, then that really breaks down this false sacred secular divide. Do you guys agree with that?
Yep, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
That
it's all sacred.
That as we partner with Jesus. Yep, right. Absolutely. I mean, so whether things happen on church campus or in our jobs, regardless of our vocation, our entire life is an act of worship, and that because there's always
our disobedience.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Keep going with that.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I mean, there was really nowhere else to go. I'm just trying to think of all the ways that were worship. When I treated my team with respect, when I showed up on time, when I used encouraging words to speak to my wife this morning. That's all worship. And when you said everything we do is worship, I was like, okay, what's not worship? I was like, okay, just the one thing. Disobedience isn't worship. Repentance is. Saying I'm sorry is. Like every bit of that is a logical, humble posture, work, Levitical work, to help mediate between God and man.
I've been trying to look through some of the responses from others in the Fully Alive community, just kind of based on some of these questions that were thrown out. And I don't necessarily want to sit here and like peruse through everything, but if you guys have the opportunity to kind of look through that as well, that might kind of spur on just some helpful stuff too. Because I think I think sometimes people. Well, I'm working with one guy. I'll kind of share this, see where this takes us. I work with one guy who, as he is growing in character and calling in my discipleship huddle, is that I could tell that there seemed to be some guilt and some shame arising because he feels he's too busy to worship. Too busy to worship. And my hope for bringing this up is to get really practical for people who are listening to this is, and so if truly being a good, loving husband and father, that is an act of worship. Being a responsible employee is an act of worship. Serving somebody in need is an act of worship. And I think, we don't want to over spiritualize, that worship is, I don't know, just serving in a church ministry or serving on Sunday morning or going to the worship service. But it is these small daily acts of love and obedience. And so I just bring that up in case somebody's listening that, if they're feeling kind of similar where it's like, oh, I don't have time for Jesus because I'm doing the dishes or I'm taking care of my kids and all this other kind of stuff, I don't know if any of you guys want to kind of riff off that, but I thought that was worth bringing up because I think that's really practical.
Well, I would say if an act of worship, like you were talking about, Brian, part of that is the reverence for the acknowledgement of but the other part of that is in service to God, and that sounds like what you're talking about, Jason. There are so many ways. In fact, if we just orient ourselves that way, everything we do, besides, like you said, Brian, everything besides this obedience is worship or has the potential to be worship. And so if what we are becoming is more like Jesus and we are better conduits for his love to flow through us and out into the rest of the world, then when we do that, we are worshiping. We're that mediator of God's love, through us and imparted on to those people around us, so that we're making the places around us more like heaven, and the people around us are pointed to him through that love. I don't know what is better worship. I don't know, as we just love others, as we do our work well, as we honor God in the way that we do that, all of that, you can't help but, if you just take that attitude and take that posture that what I'm doing right now, whatever it is, I'm going to do it as if working for God, as if this is service to him, because it truly is. And that's what his word says, right?
Yep.
And so I don't know of a better form, personally.
Yeah, no, I love that. What is
Jason,
that? It's Colossians 3:23. That whatever you do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men. Yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
Go ahead, Brian.
And Jason, you used some language there. You're like, not to over spiritualize these things. Well, I think I would rather run the risk of over spiritualizing them than under spiritualizing them.
That's fair.
And I think if there's an issue, it's we've not given enough spiritual credit to a business owner that wants to make sure that he or she is in the people development business.
Right.
That's a gospel activity, right? And there's legal implications of how you do all this stuff, but it's a very spiritual act of worship because you really are trying to use your spiritual gifts to really enhance the lives of people. You can have a business that's all about your bottom line and your wallet, or you can have it as I get the opportunity to steward a growing, company of people. And that's an act of worship. I'd rather over spiritualize that than continue to have a persistent wall that says that's not spiritual and makes people say things like, your buddy, I don't have time to worship. It's like, well, let's just put some appropriate labels on it. Let's over spiritualize things for a while.
Yeah. And come to think of it, I probably should have used the word under spiritualized when I had said that. No, thanks for bringing that up. Fully Alive by Disciples Made, we are committed to the character times calling equals impact way of life. Yeah. Brian, could you just tell us a little bit about how, so as a disciple in the Fully Alive app, hoping to grow in character and calling, how does that impact my life of worship?
The shortest answer that I can think of off the top of my head is the Fully Alive app and all the resources in it exposes people to the plan Jesus has for helping you overcome the work of the thief and partner with him to live fully alive. Like, we give absolute data as to what that looks like, why it looks like that from the Bible, how to do it with courses, etc. You get the choice as to whether or not you want to take Jesus, and what he has to offer. And at any time in your life, you are pushing into the promises of Jesus to actually develop the fruit of the Spirit, cultivate your masterpiece mission through your spiritual gifts. That is an act of worship. Like, you truly are surrendering yourself. You're posturing yourself and saying, I don't want to run my life anymore. I want Jesus through his Spirit to run it. I'm not about serving me anymore. I want to serve God and others first. That's a constant battle, right? I like serving me. My default is to serve me. I like thinking I'm the king of my universe, and when people acknowledge that I am. I actually hate it very much, but the default is, wake me up without coffee on Saturday morning and it's about me. Mm-hmm. It's only when Jesus kind of retools me through reading his word, etc., that it becomes about God knows. And this will go into our the generosity conversation. So I'm really excited about how you're setting this up. But really, it's my choice is it's about me or it's about God and others. And anytime you follow Jesus into that fully alive plan, you're saying it's less about me and more about him. And that is about the best, most logical response.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. And I think with all of that, it's about becoming like Jesus, that selfless influence. And Psalm 100 verse 4 says, enter his gates with thanksgiving, go into his courts with praise, give thanks to him and praise his name. And November we have a wonderful opportunity, obviously, with Thanksgiving coming up, the opportunity to selflessly influence, to selflessly love, to selflessly serve our family, extended family, friends, or serving out in the community, the opportunity to enter God's courts with thanksgiving. Because I think, Craig, you had mentioned earlier just that this life of worship starts with surrendering to the Lord of Lords, starts with surrendering to the Prince of Peace, to surrendering our plans, who we are, our family, everything about us to the one who created us, who loves us, who saves us, who redeems us, who transforms us. There's so much that can start with just a simple act of thanksgiving that can lead to a posture and a life of thanksgiving, which I think is a lifestyle of worship that's logical and reasonable. And I think a lot of it that starts with that posture of surrender and thanksgiving that leads us to a lifestyle of generosity, which is also a lifestyle of worship. I'd love to hear from you guys just how, when you think about a lifestyle of worship, discipleship journey as worship, helping others grow in character and calling as worship, how that all plays into generosity. Because I can think of a lot of things: generosity with our time, generosity with our finances, generosity with our gifts, passion, and story. I mean, all of this kind of stuff, right? So let's wrap up today a little bit with just talking about generosity as a part of that journeying with Jesus as a lifestyle of worship.
I'll jump in here on this. We have a men's group called Impact, and we have regular meetings where men gather, and then we have regular acts of service. In fact, the central reason for the existence of this group is to disciple each other, disciple men, and primarily men that are on mission. That we disciple as we go, and in that way, we spend time in a classroom kind of environment. We meet as a group, but we go out throughout the weekends, and we serve. We serve people that are within the church body. We serve people that are outside of the church body, primarily just trying to express the love of Jesus through those acts of service. So a story, and this is true, but I'll tell it kind of as an anecdote, is that, if a man comes to this group, it's because he's been invited. I mean, there's an open invitation, but more than likely, if he comes, it's because another man invited me. He said, "Hey, come and hang out with us on Thursday evening. We've got this group of men, and we just really try to become more like Jesus, try to invest in each other, and we try to learn what it means to be more like Jesus where we live, work, and play." And so he comes, and what he'd find is that we open up in prayer. We open up recognizing God and who He is, and give thanks for that. And then we go into worship, and we don't sing. There's a bunch of guys. We don't sing well. None of us are worship leaders. We're just some regular dudes, right? Nobody wants to hear that. But what we do is what this guy will hear is he will hear the good news that God has done in our lives this week. I heard one time, in fact, my pastor say, it's great that if you're able to tell a story about something great that God did in your life in 1995. But wouldn't it be better if you're talking about what God did last Tuesday, what God did yesterday, what God did today, so that there's this, I was talking about it earlier, but this expectation that God is always moving, He's always working, and He's always doing good stuff in and around and through us. And so he's going to hear these stories of what these men experienced over the course of the last week. Since what last we met, where did they go? How did they serve? How did God move through them? How did He see them? To me, that's great worship, right? Acknowledging all that good stuff. And then, so he's going to hear that. And then we're going to hear about what opportunities he might have to serve coming up this next week. So how might he now engage in that? And he's going to be invited into that. He's going to be encouraged. He's not going to be forced. It's not it's not mandatory, but he's going to be exampled into that, invited into that. And he's not going to be on his own. He's always going to be, mentored, guided, and walked with. And so then we'll break out and we'll go into God's word. And we use the Disciples Made, the Fully Alive set of resources to disciple these men as they grow. And we work through the Explorer level courses, the Develop level courses, and we always have FMs, full of Followers Mades and those kinds of groups going on, just as men grow and develop through this process. So if he'll participate in that wherever he'll just jump in, right? And we will and help him get settled in and to get set up on the app, all of that good stuff. So he'll be invited, like I said, into a service opportunity that week. And if he chooses to go, like I love to tell this story of a man serving for the first time, going and serving at a mobile home community that's around. And so a young couple with kids, not working, definitely need help, and going to help just do some work on their trailer so that it's safer for them and for their kids. In the process of this guy that shows up for the first time the previous Thursday and gets invited into this work, he gets to enjoy the company and fellowship of the men that are working on this with him. He gets to see how they pray over these people, how they interact with these people, how they show the love and good news of Jesus to these people. But then also in the process, and this happened, guy happens to see that they don't have any food in his cupboard, in their cupboard. Their refrigerator's pretty bare, the cupboard's pretty bare. He had plans to go watch a movie and take his kids out to eat, that evening. And what he did instead was pay for those people to get some food. And so he gave up that movie and dinner. They watched something they watched a Netflix movie or something, I don't know, and got some pizza from the store. And he sacrificed his evening for those people. And that may seem like a small thing, but what he did in those moments was he gave what he had to those people. He put them before him, still provided for his family, but in a different way. And it showed them, that sacrifice. And more importantly, it showed him what it felt like to be an instrument of Jesus and to move from where he was to that incredible act of service, act of worship. I mean, that to me is just it's a great story. I love to tell it, but that's one of the ways that we use discipleship to foster just generosity and the fruit of that.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of the great, commandment, right? Love God and love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. And that's the process of discipleship, right? That becoming more like Jesus means loving more like Jesus. I mean, if you've taken the My Impact assessment, the first question is like, do I, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do I love people unconditionally like Jesus does? And that this journey of discipleship, as we grow in our character, allows us to love God more by the work of his Spirit in our lives, to love our neighbor more, and also too is to love ourselves more, that we were made in the image of God. And so I hear that, Craig, that what you're seeing in North Texas is that, for men and their discipleship journey is that they're loving more. They're loving their wives more deeply. They're loving each other more deeply. They're loving God more deeply. And then that's showing up as their selfless influence in the world, and they're willing to be generous and to make sacrifices because that's what it means to love God and to love our neighbor. I love hearing that. So I want to open this up. Brian, I know better that I don't want to move on before I give you the opportunity to speak. Before we kind of segue to just a little bit of, Q&A and stuff to allow some people to ask some questions. Is there anything maybe that you wish we would have touched on? Maybe, one thought or at least a statement that as people are going to engage on the Fully Alive app throughout the month of November, what's one thing that maybe we forgot to talk about that you're like, I really need to make sure that we say this today?
Well, thanks. Apparently you can read that in my eyes and my whatever. I do have a very important thought I really want to share about generosity in general, but it seems like Myra has had some things on her mind and heart she wanted to share, so I want to make sure she's got opportunity if there is that. If I misread that, Myra, just tell me.
No.
It's past or whatever.
As I was listening to Craig and just throughout all of this, connecting discipleship to generosity involves surrender, service, and sacrifice. And I can't, when I do my assessments, I can't say that I'm generous if I haven't sacrificed something, because that's the model of Jesus. And that's what his word teaches. When we look at the story of the widow's mite, she sacrificed it all. And that's an true act of worship. And I keep asking myself, realizing in myself, I am not there. I don't know that in my heart I'm ready to sacrifice it all, be it time or treasure or whatever. It's a daily thing.
Thank you for that. Jason, I think the way you kicked this section off was brilliant in trying to turn people away from the temptation to view generosity simply through financial currency. There are many different currencies that we engage with. The one that I hear more than any is time, treasure, and talents. The 3 categories. Time, I've only got so much. The example you gave of the guy that says, I just don't have time to worship. There's there's a piece of the pie kind of idea about that. There is the treasure, how much, money. There's my house. How often do I invite people into my home, into my life, and hospitality, vulnerability? Like there's so many currencies. And the one thing I wanted to get it across is Jesus gives us kind of the gate percentage that unlocks a posture that leads to life. Like when it comes to my finances, he says you should give 10%. Why should I give 10%? Because if you do that, you're demonstrating with your life a measure of trust that's being asked for. God's saying, I'm giving you 100% of what you have. You're still healthy. You're still all these other things. I want 10% back. And I don't think it's a tax. Like we kind of view that as a tax. We have to pay God 10%. I don't see it that. I think it's an invitation to trust and to step away from self-centeredness to God and others-centeredness, which is a freedom. It's like, I'm going to pay this 10% just to not be a slave to myself. And if you get that tithe idea with your financial currency, then you can start thinking of other things. I've got so much time. Well, I'm going to give a tithe or a 10% of my time to engaging intentionally around some things. Like we're going to make it about all this, but all my time. How about my meals? How about the time at my house? How about the time with my family? When you start to think of all the different currencies you have, if we want to generate generosity, the 10% is the gate, not the end. That's the gate of being free from serving yourself instead of serving God and others. There's no joy in serving yourself, but that's our default. There's joy in what that gentleman did in Craig's story. Like his family will remember that forever. And so it's like God invites us to get out of the trap of self-gathering and to engage into this world of generosity. And so thank you for inviting us to see it outside. I just wanted to add that 10% and spread it from finance to every area of life.
Oh, thanks,
And
Brian.
that's discipleship.
Go ahead, Maya.
Quick statement based on what Brian said. That self-gathering may be the biggest attack of the thief. If he can keep us self-gathering instead of self-giving, that's it. Therein lies freedom. I think maybe that's just another way to say what Brian was saying.
It's big.
Yep. I thought immediately of my one of my daughters. The conversation, she loves grabbing my phone and looking at Amazon, and it's just, but honestly, like the more she grabs my phone and looks at Amazon, the more I have the opportunity to talk to her about generosity and about giving, and I tell you, where there's so much temptation just to gather for ourselves and to hoard and to want more and more and more. And, so these words of freedom and love, selfless influence, all of these things, joy, we're called to bless the world. And what a better way to do it than being generous with our time, talents, and treasures, recognizing that all of life is an opportunity to say, Jesus is Lord, and I surrender to you because, God, you're good. You are good. And so with that being said, we don't have any questions coming through at all. And so as I kind of ramble here for about 10 to 15 seconds, if anybody does have questions that they haven't posted,
Ramble on.
No, I can ramble quite easily. And so post your questions on Facebook or on Riverside here, and we'll take just a couple minutes. And there we go. All right. Well, looks like we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. So today, thank you for being with us. All of you who, of course, Brian, Meyer, and Craig, it's always a joy to be with you. And then everyone who's on the Fully Alive app and those maybe listening for the first time. Today, we've looked at discipleship as a life of worship and how this perspective bridges Sundays to every day, encouraging us to live and to give generously in response to God's goodness. As we approach year's end, your generous support is vital to Fully Alive by Disciples Made. Approximately 25% of our annual budget is funded between Thanksgiving and New Year's. And this year, your investment can have a greater impact than ever. God is moving powerfully through this Fully Alive community, and we're set to cross. Actually, I believe we just crossed 3,000 members earlier today, which is super, super exciting in the Fully Alive by Disciples Made app. So your giving, if you are led, directly supports new team members, strategic outreach, and a bold vision by December of 2025 to add 17,000 disciples to Fully Alive. And it is an incredible opportunity. So excited to be on this journey with you. And so we just invite you to join us in accelerating this mission. If you want to check that out, you can go to disciplesmade.com/give. disciplesmade.com/give. And thank you so much for partnering with Jesus to bring heaven to earth through Disciples Made in your partnership. We love walking with you. We are accessible on the Fully Alive by Disciples Made app. If you ever just want to reach us a message, feel free to engage. So thank you so much, Brian, Craig, and Myra, for sharing today. And thank you to our audience for joining. Let's keep living out worship through our lives as disciples and disciple makers, making an impact every day. Have a great day, and we will see you next month.
Jason, can I toss one thing in before you shut this thing down?
Oh, if you have to, Brian, go ahead.
Just for clarity, thank you for letting me be all obnoxious today. We're unique at Fully Alive. We're not asking for that tithe. We would rather you tithe your church. And if you did anything, tithe 10% of what you would tithe to the church to help us do what we do. We're a small part. We are for your church. We're not a church. We're for the church. Doesn't cost as much for us to do what we do. And so I just want to say that. If you don't have a place where you're tithing, we want to help you find one. Just let us know where you are, and we'll let you know if we know anybody in those areas. And if you want to give a tithe type of contribution, I guarantee you it will be used to promote the kingdom of God around the world. So just wanted to offer that clarity.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a fantastic afternoon.